Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and despite the heat and humidity, that means Tag Tuesday here on BookTube, where we do tags. And I'm doing a tag that's part of an epic cycle, an alphabet cycle. Jim at Jim's Books and Reading and Stuff is doing the alphabet tags letter by letter. And we are all the way up to the letter U. It's great fun. The prompts are great fun. The first one is U is for unicorn. What is your favorite fantasy creature? And the snarky part of me immediately wanted to respond with a Republican. Because there's no Republicans left in the United States of America. They're all part of a personality cult of a fascist leader. So we don't have two parties anymore, and that's the first time in my lifetime that that's ever happened. But that would be snarky, and we want to avoid snark on this channel. So I will say Sandworms as a doff of the hat to a read-along that I'm doing of Dune. I'll say Sandworms from Frank Herbert's Dune, because that's the number one question when it comes to the big squintillion-dollar Hollywood movie that's coming out at the end of this month. How convincing will the Sandworms be? How good will they be? That's the absolute yardstick of Dune adaptations. There's rumors of sandworms and talk about sandworms, and then finally there's a climactic scene in the first part of Dune where a sandworm makes its appearance in a very dramatic fashion. It's the first time that we actually see one of them in the book. Frank Herbert certainly rises to the challenge. And then there's the disastrous Dune movie that does not rise to the challenge, where the sandworm can't look like a worm. Okay, it can't look like a garden worm. It's got to be frightening. And then there was the sandworm in the sci-fi adaptation of Dune that I thought worked really well in that scene. I thought it was really, really well done, considering that they had a very small budget, comparatively speaking. But this squintillion-dollar movie that's coming out has an unlimited budget. So we'll see. We'll see what that's like. Then the next prompt is U is for USA. If you are from the USA, which state are you living in? What is special about that state? I live in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the greatest state in the Union. And there isn't anything that isn't special about it. It is absolutely tremendous in every possible way. I don't know that there's anything in Massachusetts west of the west suburbs of Boston. I've heard rumors that there are cities in the western part of the state. I don't know if that's actually true. But Boston, certainly, as a state, is terrific. I had to laugh when I watched Bill Rutenberg do this tag. When he got to this prompt, he talked about Iowa, the state of Iowa, where he is from. And he lives in small town Iowa, and he described what it was like, that everybody knows your business, and you know everybody's business, but everybody's also there to help, and you're there to help everybody else. No one is in it alone. Yes, there's a large amount of privacy that is sacrificed, but there are compensations. And that partly made me want to tear up, because I remember what life in small town Iowa was like, and I really, really miss it. But it also partly made me irritated, not at Bill, but at the fact that what he's describing there would need explanation in the 21st century. I know it does. But what he's describing there is something called a community. That's what a community is. It's where you don't get to hole up all by yourself. You're part of a community. I guess in small towns all over the world it might still exist, but small towns are an endangered species all over the world. So I had to smile a little when I saw that. That feeling may exist in Western Massachusetts. In my particular community, it does not. But the next prompt is U is for USA and USSR. Do you have a favorite book on the Cold War? For me, it's Service's book. It's a big, fat volume. I think it came out from Basic Books a few years ago. I think I wrote about it. And it is still the best book for me on the subject. Is his name Robert Service? It's across the room. There's no way that I can get it without leaving the camera. But it's a big black volume that I think was from Basic Books. I'll leave a notation down below. It's a strong recommend for you, for instance, for Nonfiction November. But it's huge, so it'll take you some time. Let's see here. U is for Uruguay, Uganda, the UAE, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso. Have you read any books connected with any of these countries? I'm not good at this kind of prompt at all, but Uganda rang a bell. Because I recently read a book called Idi Amin by Mark Leopold that I really, really enjoyed. I think I reviewed it. If I did, I'll leave a link to it down below. Because it wasn't just a story about Idi Amin, it was a story about how we understand our stories about Idi Amin. How do we even construct a history of this person? When the mythologizers and the urban legendizers were in at the ground level right away, how do we even do that? How do we know anything about this person? I thought the book was fascinating for asking those kinds of questions, and those kinds of questions just got more fascinating when you realize that they apply to all biography. I strongly recommend the book. I don't know if it's in paperback yet, but I'll leave a link. Then U is for underwater. What is your favorite book set underwater? I'm not 100% sure about favorite, but one that I really liked that keeps coming back to me is by James Cambias, and it's called The Darkling Sea. It's a science fiction novel. I think I reviewed it. That is about searching for intelligent technological life underwater, but also under ice, in a vast subterranean ocean of a type that we now know beyond a shadow of a doubt we have a couple at least of in our own solar system. Moons that have vast oceans underneath a thick layer of ice. Oceans that only see hints of any kind of light, but that are also protected from great monstrous curtains of lethal radiation. And that are those surfaces are pockmarked and pounded all the time by asteroids, many of which may have organic life on them. It's not hard, in other words, to picture that there might be life in those oceans. Maybe even life that's been evolving for millennia. I don't think there's any way to know, short of putting a probe on the ice of one of those moons and actually drilling down. But this book, A Darkling Sea, takes off from that premise, there wouldn't be an ocean, an open-air ocean, in other words, where you would find these beings. And it's grim and really icily written. I liked it a lot. Let's see here. U is for umbrella. What is a good book for a rainy day? We're not going to have any rain in Boston for the next 2 or 3 months. So the distinction is a little bit without meaning for me. Rainy days tend to make me want to reread. I don't quite know why that is, but when in the distant past, when Boston had 4 seasons and when we did have rain, I would remember in the morning setting my day's routine, and then the rain would be hitting the windows, and I would think, okay, but I really feel like reading Boswell's London Journal or something like that instead. Not a new edition, not a new annotated edition of Boswell's London Journal, but just my trusty old hardcover in the little book room. So it wouldn't be a specific book; it'd be a kind of reading. Rereading, I tended to want to do on rainy days. It's all low 80s with 97% humidity here now. We are an arid tropical climate, so we don't have any precipitation of any kind, and we don't have any winter. So it's a distant memory, but still, I cling to it because they were pleasant memories. Then U is for urban fantasy. Have you read any urban fantasy? Do you have a favorite book in this subgenre? I never really know whether or not what I'm reading is urban fantasy. I guess it's fairies and tenements, that sort of thing. I've never read any example of what I think is typically referred to as urban fantasy that I in any way liked. The closest that you could probably come would be The Borables. Do any of you remember that book? The Borables, and then I think it had a sequel called The Borables Go for Broke. That I read. It was science fiction. I read it decades ago. I haven't seen a copy of The Borables since. I imagine that it's what would now be considered urban fantasy, but I don't really know. Unless you're talking about something like The Lies of Loch Lomorna, or Perdita Street Station, or the Veraconium novels of M. John Harrison. Are those urban fantasy? They certainly seem it to me. The cities are inextricable from the stories. But if those count, if things like that count, then I would say, the Veraconium stories of M. John Harrison, which if you are a fantasy fan and you have not read them, oh my, are you missing a treat. Then let's see here. U is for Ulysses. What does Ulysses mean for you in your reading life? I'm assuming here that Jim is referring to James Joyce's Ulysses, his pretentious, almost unreadable, complete waste of time of a novel. I'm assuming that that's what he means, and not the character Ulysses, the mythological character Ulysses, who's always called Odysseus by everybody in the world but me. If we're referring to the Joyce book, what it means in my reading life is an enormous gaping waste of time. Not only for me, but for everybody else. It's not just that it was a waste of time for me to slog my way through, but it's a horrible kind of, running while you're in a dream where you can't stop a tragedy from happening. I'll see a young person get all the vapors about James Joyce's Ulysses, and I want to tell them, I'm shouting in my dream, I want to tell them, it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your time. If you want to get high, just go and buy some edibles, but don't waste your reading time on this book. Your reading time is precious. It falls on deaf ears. Sometimes it makes converts. I don't know. Or another thing that Ulysses might mean would be the novel that I wrote called Steve Donoghue's Ulysses. Not James Joyce's Ulysses, but Steve Donoghue's Ulysses, which is a novel of the Odyssey. It's the Odyssey in novel form. It's quite good. Then let's see here. U is for unread. Roughly what percentage of the books on your shelves remain unread? I have no idea how to calculate percentages, but I do have a number, 43 books. I got up and counted. There are 43 books in Hyde Cottage that I have not read. They're all forthcoming. All the books that are on my shelves I've read. Sometimes many, many times. But I have 43 books here that I haven't read. So I suppose if I could get the percentage if I had an accurate count of all the books that I have here. But I don't. That's part of Project Harrigan, is to get an accurate count of my books by first getting rid of hundreds of books and then pulling everything off the shelf and putting it all where it belongs. All of World War II history together. All of Roman history together. All science fiction and fantasy together. And then when that's all done, and there's no dross, and there's no extra, and there's no waste, then a complete count of those books. But I don't really know. Those of you who are mathematically inclined, if I have 5,000 books here, what percentage of 5,000 is 43? I have no idea. No idea. I don't even know how I do that. Maybe I just ask Google. Then there are bonus prompts, which I expect you to do. Because I expect everybody to do these alphabet tags. That's why I don't tag people. I want you all to do them. If you use this alphabet, you must do the alphabet tag. The first bonus prompt is, which of the following authors most appeals to you? And they all have U's. It's Leon Uris, Umberto Eco, or Ursula Le Guin. And no offense meant to Mark Richardson here about Leon Uris, and no offense meant to Jason Harrigan about Umberto Eco, but for me it would be Ursula Le Guin. I like all three of them in one way or another. I think Leon Uris, like Herman Wouk, is really due for a rediscovery. And Umberto Eco, I have my ups and downs with his books. I've liked some of them a lot more than others, and like everybody else, I was learning a whole lot from Jason Harrigan's discussion of Foucault's Pendulum. But Ursula Le Guin, I love almost everything that she wrote. Except the thing that I'm supposed to love. I only like the Earthsea books. I don't love them. When they were clearly the thing she wrote that was closest to a grab for common popularity. And they have it. They're beloved. But I had that big, beautiful, illustrated Tales of Earthsea in my hand the other day to buy. And I thought, well, it sure is a lovely volume, but you don't love these books enough to warrant getting this. But even so, I would say Le Guin. Then U is for UFO. Have you seen a UFO? Have you enjoyed a book exploring the first contact with aliens? I have never seen a UFO. No. And even if I had seen a UFO, I wouldn't have seen an extraterrestrial object. I would only have seen what the title actually refers to, which is an unidentified flying object. So I wouldn't have seen a flying object, and I would have said, I have no idea what that is. That's all. It wouldn't have been, I don't have any idea what that is, so it must be a visiting interstellar spacecraft. It wouldn't be that, because those don't exist. But I've never even seen a UFO. Even in the most humble sense of the term, when I've been out hiking, like forever in the tundra, and something lifts off and flies into the sky, that could be a UFO. It's an unidentified flying object. But in almost all of those cases, I was able to identify the object. I was able to take just a good long look at it and tell what kind of hawk it was, what kind of egret it was. But I do recommend a book, First Contact. I think I reviewed it. It's pretty good. I'll leave a link again if I remember. And then U is for upcoming. What book release are you looking forward to? Jim actually has the quaint charm of putting release in singular instead of plural. I am concentrating more and more as we come closer to the end of the year. It's a little bit hard to concentrate because it's hot. It's summer. And that it doesn't feel like the end of the year at all. But I'm still concentrating extra hard on the fact that the calendar end of the year is approaching, which is a time for my epic Steve Reads Year's Best and Worst Books collection, where I go through the best and worst books in the 15 or 16 genres that I read. And that is making me extra mindful of the fact that there are tons and tons of forthcoming books still to come in this year that I very much want to read. The list is very long. I've done partial lists on a number of different tags recently, but I still want to jot down a few books for this one. There is Lauren Blakely. She has a new book called Come Again. It's a contemporary romance, and she's one of the only contemporary romance writers that I actually really like. I think that comes out in December. Very much looking forward. These might all be late November or December releases that I don't have yet. Another one is by Stephen Isserlis, and it is a companion to the Bach cello suites. Lots of essays, lots of analysis, lots of appreciations about the Bach cello suites, which I think are amazing, inhuman pieces of work, just inhumanly gorgeous. I haven't read a companion on them in 40 years, so looking forward to that. Another one is Wannsee. This is by Peter Longerich, who did a couple of great Nazi biographies. He did a great study of the Holocaust. And in this book, he studies the Wannsee Conference in 1942. That is the closest that we really have to the Nazi leadership explicitly stating their plan for the Jews. It's a fascinating event, this building that, you know, the big black Nazi cars were pulling up to for this conference. Well, all sorts of different people talking, different fragmentary notes, that sort of thing about what went on, what was actually said, who was there even, how long they talked, who talked with each other. Really kind of a concentration point for the enunciation of Nazi evil. Not the doing of it, but the saying of it. I can't wait to read what Longerich has to say on the subject. I'm sure that Wannsee is out already in the UK, but it's not out in America for a month, I think. Then there's a book by Neil Richards called Why Privacy Matters that apparently is going to dig into not only why privacy matters, but the huge unprecedented assaults that it's under in the 21st century. People who were born in the 21st century don't even really, the ones that I've talked to, don't even really understand what privacy is. It's not that that they know what it is and they're willing to sacrifice it for more clout online. It's that they don't even really have a clear idea of what it is. I see this all the time. When I look at Instagram, I see this all the time. A young guy, 22 years old, unfortunate enough to lose his father. His father dies, and he's putting up Instagram pictures of his father's hand with intravenous needles in it an hour before he died, and the caption on the picture is, "This was an hour before he died." That is a private moment. That does not belong on social media. That is a private moment, and it's unthinkable. It's not even. It doesn't even cross the radar of young people. What an older generation would have considered privacy doesn't even cross their radar. They have no idea what you're talking about or why you would care. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll probably depress the heck out of me. And then the final one for this prompt and this tag is Lord of the Rings. I would think I would need no other editions of Lord of the Rings. But I think in November, a big, beautiful hardcover one-volume Lord of the Rings is coming out that is full of J.R.R. Tolkien's own illustrations. The ones that used to be on the mass-market paperback covers of the trilogy. And that this thing is giving them color plates all throughout the book. So I have a one-volume Lord of the Rings that has Alan Lee illustrations all throughout, and that's lovely. But I want this one. I absolutely do. I absolutely want this one. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And all those are upcoming, but that I don't have them yet. So they definitely count. And that is it. That is the U tag. So we're going to see how Jim does the next one. But that was a lot of fun. And if you're not doing these alphabet tags, well, you have quite a few to get to. And if you are, I look forward to your U tag. But In any case, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.